All right, we're good to go. I would like to start by apologizing for the trouble and the technical problems. Actually, in my seat would be Erasmia Grigorelli, the presenter of this panel. Hopefully, we're gonna have her on the next one. So I'm gonna present and introduce this wonderful panel and start our discussion. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all of you joining us from all over the world. And I welcome you to the Greek Scientist Society Inaugural Conference on Cybersecurity, the role of cybersecurity for a modern day society. Today, we have the great pleasure to be joined by distinguished speakers from every corner of the world, representing the academia and the research world, the public domain. Actually, we miss Dr. Andreas Mitrakas. I hope he will join us. I know that he is in an airport and maybe he's in a flight at the moment from ENISA. Speakers from academia, research, public domain, and the industry who will share their experiences, offer their insight, and answer your questions. We have Q&A at the end, and we will start this session. Let me say a few housekeeping rules. Please familiarize yourself with the platform features. On the left, there's raise hand feature. You can also send your question on the Q&A section. If you wish to get invited on stage, we can invite you on stage live for a short comment or ask your question at the end of this session for Q&A. You should introduce yourself at the beginning. At the bottom of the screens, you can use the emoticons. I would like to stress that the event is recorded. It will be uploaded on the Greek Scientist Society YouTube channel. We also stream the event on LinkedIn Live, Facebook, and YouTube. So please send us your question to pass them to the speakers. I will start by presenting the first panel discussants. Dr. Konstantin Passaris is a professor of economics at the University of New Brunswick in Canada and an affiliate member of the Canadian Institute of Cybersecurity. He has served as a member of the Economic Council of Canada and is chairman many boards and committees, as well as an advisor to the Canadian Commission for UNESCO. We don't have Dr. Mitrakas. If he will join us, I will say a few words later for him. We have Ms. Caroline Wong, which is the Chief Strategy Officer at Cobalt, leading security community and people teams. She hosts the Human of InfoSec podcast, teaches cybersecurity course on LinkedIn Learning, and has authored the popular textbook Security Metrics, a Beginner's Guide. She holds a bachelor's degree in electrical engineering and computer science from UC Berkeley and a certificate in finance and accounting from Stanford University, Graduate School of Business, and also is nominated in Top 10 Women in Cloud by CloudNOW. We have Mr. Darren Mott as well, who is currently a senior staff member for Quantum Research International, managing 50 cybersecurity analysts at the National Cybersecurity Operations Centers in Huntsville, Alabama. Prior to this position, Mr. Mott was an FBI special agent for 20 years, where he investigated and managed cyber and counterintelligence investigation in Charlotte, Cleveland, Birmingham, and the FBI headquarters. He holds 2 master's degrees, one in education and one in cybersecurity policy and risk analysis. He is famous for his podcast, The CyBUr Guy, where he talks to cyber professionals and former FBI agents about current cyber threats, past investigation, and cyber-based news items. I would like to give special thanks to Mr. Basil Manoussos, who is going to moderate the discussions in both the panels. Mr. Manoussos is an expert witness in digital evidence and cybercrime. He's currently the Cyber Academy manager at the School of Computing Engineering and Built Environment at Napier University in Edinburgh, UK. He brings more than 13 years of experience, not 13 minutes, definitely, Basil. 13 years of experience in digital forensics as an expert witness, working with legal professionals in Scotland and the rest of the UK, as well as a 30 plus years overall industry experience. His background includes working for organizations like IBM, AB National, UK government, etc. The floor to you, Mr. Manoussos.
Thank you very much, Theo, and thank you for inviting me and giving me the honor of being one of the moderator of this very interesting panel. So I think we should start with Ms. Wong, with Caroline. And Caroline, would you like to talk to us about how you see cybersecurity as part of a modern day society, and what is your approach to this? I think you are muted, Caroline. You are muted. We cannot hear you. Hello? Okay, then something's wrong with Caroline's connection. I think we can actually, let's try with Darren.
Okay, thanks. Thanks so much. I appreciate the opportunity to come and speak. So as Theo mentioned, I am a retired FBI special agent, spent 20 years working cyber crime matters and counterintelligence matters for the Bureau all over the country and dealt with entities all over the world. And been involved with computers and the cyber world since 1977, actually, when I looked at my first computer that my mother was programming at a small bank, and I was fascinated by them from that perspective, and have seen the size of computers change from the size of a room down to, you know, your little phone in your hand. And I've seen, since joining when I was with the FBI, see the threats change over time from being more nuisance related type threats to what they are now, which is targeting every industry, every entity, every conceivable corner of the world that has information that can be monetized, stolen, or used for other purposes. So what I've done since I retired, I have an education degree and a cybersecurity degree, try to blend those two things together to demystify what cybersecurity is. Cyber itself is not even really a word. It's something somebody made up, and everybody now uses it to mean computers and bad things happening with computers. I mean, for my first 2 years in the FBI, the FBI didn't even have a cyber division per se. So my goal is to help people demystify what cybersecurity really is, because it's really not that hard to protect yourself from the risks of cybersecurity. It's just a matter of understanding that those risks are there. Risks is threats times vulnerability. So if you can understand the threats that are targeting you, you can assess your risk and you can then proceed wisely. And so if you know what your vulnerabilities are, you know who the threats are targeting you, then you can have a better road down as far as reducing your cyber risk. You're never going to eliminate it. You're never going to get rid of cyber risk. It's always going to be there, regardless of what industry you're in. If you're in, if you're a scientist, if you're an educator, if you're in industry, cyber actors are looking for the information you have. So we can demystify that just by a general understanding and awareness of what cybersecurity means and what it means to you individually in your industry. This is Cybersecurity Awareness Month, actually, so this is a good time for this conference. So hopefully we can do some of those things here in this hour.
Good. And let's go back to Caroline. Caroline, are you okay now? We cannot hear you. Well, we'll go to Professor Passalis then. Konstantin.
Thank you very much, Mr. Moderator, and greetings to our colleagues participating in this very important conference from around the world. I want to start my remarks by giving a special shout out to Theo Zacharis, who is the founder and the brainchild of the Greek Scientist Society for developing this conference. Just to think of the number of different timelines that he had to deal with in terms of getting the people together at one particular time frame was a horrendous task. So I think we should all applaud and commend him for his efforts and his resilience in this matter.
Hear, hear.
I want to talk today, folks, about cybersecurity within the context of the new global economy of the 21st century. The ascent of the new global economy has spotlighted the importance of cybersecurity for social and economic institutions. It has underlined the urgency of confronting cyber threats for the purpose of protecting individuals, civil society, businesses, financial corporations, as well as governments at all levels. The new global economy of the 21st century has precipitated transformational technological change. Never in human history has the pace of structural change been so rapid and profound. At the same time, cyber insecurity offers the greatest threat to humanity from reaping the rewards of the immense strides in technological progress and enjoying the economic benefits from scientific breakthroughs. The new global economy rests on three pillars. These are internetization, trade liberalization, and the IT revolution. Internetization is a new word and concept that I have introduced to the economics lexicon. It describes the empowerment of the new global economy through global outreach and electronic connectivity. In effect, internetization is globalization on steroids. Second, free trade has enhanced global economic integration and extended the economic architecture. Third, the information technology revolution has made geography and time irrelevant. All these pillars of the new economy are driven by a virtually borderless world with a tremendous capacity for electronic connectivity. The first 3 decades of the 21st century have recorded a cataclysmic trifecta, starting with the global financial crisis of 2008, which adversely affected most financial institutions, followed by the protracted Great Recession that led to a sharp decline in economic growth, accompanied by high levels of unemployment. In the third decade, COVID-19 created a global tsunami of economic devastation. What do all these 3 cataclysmic events have in common? They are global in character and are driven by digital connectivity. There is no denying that internetization has revolutionized the modus operandi of contemporary businesses. It has contributed significantly to economic outreach and redefined the new global ecosystem. In effect, 95% of our social and economic existence in the 21st century is spent online. As such, we are significantly exposed and vulnerable to cyber attacks and malfeasance. These disruptive forces trigger increased costs, prevent opportunities, and diminish the full realization of humanity's progress. In consequence, cybersecurity has become the dominant conversation of the third decade of the 21st century. The reason being that it has the potential to prevent humanity's progress in reaping the rewards and benefits from the current wave of technological innovations. Increasingly, our collective future in the age of internetization is defined by an accelerated speed of constant change and the emergence of enhanced automation, robotics, artificial intelligence, and the Internet of Things. These rapid, extensive, and diverse range of electronic innovations that are made available to consumers and businesses are triggering cybersecurity alarms that reveal our exposure to digital risk, and it is accelerating every nanosecond. In conclusion, the paradigm for the wealth of nations is no longer confined to the resources under our feet, but will depend on the brain power between our ears. As a result, we must embrace internetization as our ally in the service of humanity, but we must be vigilant against cyber threats, cyber-proof our institutions, and construct the appropriate firewalls. Friends, let us therefore resolve to embrace the need for urgent action on cybersecurity and create a safer and more resilient pathway towards humanity's continued progress and prosperity. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Professor Pasaris. That was quite interesting, and I like the fact that you actually coined a new term. I wish I had thought of that. It's great when you are actually in the presence of something new. So I'm afraid we have a problem with our other two speakers. Miss Wong doesn't look like she can get on the stage. So I think we should get on, let Theo try and sort this out, and we'll get on with our conversation. Professor Pasaris, going back to the things that you said, it was quite interesting that the conclusion of all the changes and all that trifecta is that at the end, the dominant conversation in the last part of the 21st century is cybersecurity. And I'm going to have to agree with you, and I'm sure that Darren agrees with me as well. Cybersecurity affects all walks of life, affects every aspect of our life, anything from how we play games, how we shop, how we conduct our social lives. However, there are a lot of changes, and some of those changes are actually the technological changes are actually changing the way society works. We see people spending more time on their mobile phones. We see people sitting around the same table texting each other or WhatsApping with each other, and that is a sign of the times. How do you feel about this? How do you feel about how our everyday roles are changing, and how do you feel about the expansion of and the multilateralism in confronting cyber threats? Do you think that people are ready? Do people actually understand the threats that are in the cyberspace?
That's an excellent question, Vasily, and there are two dimensions to the answer that I would like to put on the table. One is there's no denying the fact, as you said, that our presence on the internet and in the cyber world is what I call the age of internetization, is very much a fact because we spend so much time online, both as individuals, as civil society, as governments, as businesses, as corporations, everybody has to be online these days because that's the nature of the world we live in. However, if you notice the checklist of the type of challenges that humanity is facing right now, like climate change, like cybersecurity, like free trade, all of those challenges of the 21st century are not domestic challenges that can be dealt with within a certain country, but are global challenges. In other words, we need global cooperation, global participation in order to make any headway towards resolving this challenge. So from my perspective, what we have inherited is public policies and public concerns that are domestic in nature. And the tools that we have are dealt with within a national scope. So what we are doing right now is pressing the buttons that we have and seeing that we don't get any results. So we tend to press harder, but we still don't get the results that we want. So I am talking about changing the conversation to building institutions, perhaps, of global cooperation, global governance that will address those global issues in a much better way and lead us with the participation of people and countries around the world to achieve the kind of results and outcomes that are desirable in the 21st century.
On that, do you think that our existing institutions can adapt to those needs, or do you think that we'll be looking at new institutions?
There are two things here. One of them is we need to look at the institutions that we have and we have inherited, and perhaps they need some renovation. We need to have a global mindset. We need to have global outreach. We need to have global participation. If we don't have those in our domestic institutions, then we need to go to plan B, which would be to build new institutions that have the profile and the ability and the terms of reference to deal with those issues.
Thank you very much. Now, Darren, we both have been in the opposite sides of the same subject, which is crime online, and you've been doing it from the FBI's perspective. I've been working on it from the defense experts and working for defense lawyers. However,
Sure.
these are the two sides of the same coin, and the truth is we both see the dark side of human nature there. And one of the things that I've seen, I was doing some research recently because I'm hearing another presentation with Interpol, and one of the things that I saw is that crimes like cyber stalking, cyberbullying are on the rise. During the pandemic, those things were exacerbated, but way more than anyone actually expected. We used to talk about spyware, where unknown actors are spying on you, but now we've got stalkware, where stalkers are actually sending malware to specific victims so they can stalk them and abuse them. And of course, this is a more narrow part of this conversation, but I would like to have your opinion on this, because how do you see technology? I mean, technology is what we do of it. Okay, the same lab that you need to make antibiotics, you can make biological weapons. It's what you do with technology. There's no good or bad technology. But how do you see, in terms of crime, the rise of crime, the rise of different kinds of crime, and how do you see that issue developing when more and more people are becoming tech savvy?
That's a great question. And something I talk about a lot on all my presentations when I talk about a variety of different topics. So one of the things that always comes down to is the bad guys, whoever they are. I mean, you got, and the bad guy spectrum runs from, the hacktivists that are mad about oil, pick your problem, and they'll do DDoS against websites, all the way up to cyber warfare. So you have a wide swath of cyber threat actors. So for what you're referring to, just the basic criminal crime has existed forever. What technology has done is made it easier for the criminal to now do what it is they want to do. If it's stalking, be it stealing from a bank, be it stealing intellectual property. So taking your stalking and your individual crime question, technology advances very rapidly. The first people that figure out how to utilize that technology to their advantage is the bad guy, whoever they are, whatever they do. And they're figuring out ways to utilize that technology for what their means are. The problem is law enforcement is always way down the road before they figure out that's a problem they need to deal with. The law itself is further down the road than the law enforcement folks that are trying to deal with it. And the politicians are completely out of it altogether. But that's just I have a negative connotation when it comes to politicians, so we won't get into that too deeply. But all that to be said, the bad guy's going to figure it out first. So let's take a look at smart locks. So a lot of people are now moving to the locks on your doors that you can use your phone, or my garage door opener. I can use my phone to open my garage door. You can use your phone to open your house. And the problem you get into now is bad guys who want to do cyber stalkers or even domestic violence. So you have a husband who's an abuser, but he's been in the house before. He now has the capability through technology to get in the house, even if he has a restraining order or he's not supposed to be there. Whereas the old type of lock he couldn't get into because you could just change the key. So if you don't change the technology on the smart lock, then he gets in. So we're seeing a rise here even of domestic abuse cases simply because they're using they're using the vulnerability of the technology to do those bad things. And I read a report the other day that has to do with knowledge of cybersecurity. And they did a poll. You would think that, folks that are more baby boomers or Generation Xers, that are more in their 50s and 60s would not understand security as well as, say, the new generation that grew up with technology. They've been, they had a cell phone in their hand at 5 years old. They've had iPads, they've had computers, they can do programming, they can probably run Python scripts if they want to, all that kind of stuff. But the Gen Xers and the millennials, the newer generation, are less likely to secure their business computers than the older generation because they just don't seem to care about it or whatever. So that's another issue that overrides all of this, is an unwillingness closing your eyes, sticking your head in the sand, just security in general, to doing the simple things to keep the bad guys out. And that's why bad guys are winning, because of this lackadaisical approach to it. The younger generation is taking convenience over security, and it's causing all sorts of big issues. And that's going to be a problem even on the more traditional violent crimes that you're talking about when the question originated.
I totally agree. And I think one of the other reasons that the millennials are people who grew up in a society where technology was something disposable. Something gets wrong with your iPhone, you throw it away and you get a new one.
Yep.
This has not been the case for Generation X or baby boomers, as you mentioned. So for us, once you acquire the computer, it was an achievement. So you kept it, and you make sure that you kept it for as long as it could possibly work, and keep it safe once you start connecting on the internet. And these are actually very significant societal differences, and I totally agree with that. I also see an increase in the people who are educated and are getting involved into cybercrime, and that is because people who study cybersecurity or digital forensics or anything along that way, they can understand how to commit crime. They can understand how they can get away with it. Okay, I had a conversation with some lawyers recently in the Law Society here in Scotland, and I said, if a judge actually, personally me, impose an order not to dox someone or not to talk about someone online, I can get around that. And police and the prosecutors can never lay their hand on me. And that's
Mhm.
because, not because I'm so smart, it's because they do not have the resources. And even if the police investigates, prosecutors do not understand what digital evidence is. And I see the gaps, for example, in our profession, that police is getting better and better. They invest in technology and equipment and tools. They hire younger people with their master's degrees and everything, and the prosecutors do nothing of the kind. The gap between those two increases, and the more it increases, the more unpunished digital crimes are going to be, and the more unpunished they are, the bigger the effect for the society.
Well, the biggest
Sorry,
problem is
everyone.
attribution. Right. The biggest problem is attribution. How do you say who it was who did the bad thing? Because I mean, if let's just say you simply wanted to download the latest movie and not get in trouble for it, a $10 VPN solves your problem altogether.
Yeah.
Because you go to the VPN, you download it, they can never trace it. And by the time law enforcement even figures out that, okay, this IP address belonged to this VPN provider, and by the time they get the court order to go to the VPN provider, chances of the VPN provider even maintaining the logs to identify it back to you is gone, long gone. So it makes it very easy, not only just for the criminal actors, but I think the nation state actors. China hacks private businesses all the time to steal their intellectual property. And what's the first thing they say whenever it makes the news that, hey, China hacked this large clear defense contractor? China says, wasn't us. You do it worse to us than we do to you. And who's going to prove it?
That's true. And false flag operations are equally simple. You are American, or you are British. You hack a British company using a VPN and using Chinese or Russian or North Korean IP addresses, and you just play the game.
But I will say there's always the stupid ones that don't use any of that stuff. The Sony hack was clearly back to North Korea, and they didn't care. They're like, yeah, we did it. We didn't like the movie. So too bad. But what are we going to do to it? Again, it gets down. What are the politicians going to do? They did nothing. They go, don't do that again.
Right. Thank you very much, both of you. I'm sorry that we cannot have our other two speakers. I see Andreas' message that you're in the session again, but I cannot see him. Theo, you're muted.
Sir, do you hear me now?
Yeah.
Speakers are in the audience. They can't manage to get on stage. So we should continue our discussion.
They are actually they're backstage.
Yeah, but the session has started. I have to invite them on stage. They have to raise their hand, but these are technicalities. I have already messaged them. Please continue the discussion with our distinguished discussant speakers.
Good. So, any questions that you would like to ask to each other? Professor Basaris and Darren?
Yes.
Vasily, this was the best question I never heard. Well done.
Of course, we're all here. Why don't we ask something to each other?
Sure.
I wanted to follow up on your question to Darren, Vasily, because in the back of my mind is I was invited one summer when I was in Greece. That was about 15 years ago, to participate in a session about cybersecurity. Now, this is a long time ago, and most of the people present were generals and air marshals and brigadiers, and they had all the commendations on their chests to prove that they had been in the war zones around the world, and they were furious, basically, with 13-year-old kids that were hacking into the military computers and creating havoc with their instructions and top-level issues. I was biting my lips because I didn't want to hurt their feelings and start laughing in their faces. That's one issue. The other issue is, whenever I've been reading about hackers into large corporations, the kind of rewards that are being asked for are $100 and $300. Now, I can't make any sense of that, because only kids would think $300 was a lot of money. Is that the case? Is that the profile of the age cohort that is hacking those big corporations?
No, not anymore. Now they're large Russian organized crime organization. They're asking for hundreds of millions of dollars. The Colonial Pipeline ransomware here in the U.S. 2 years ago, they requested 6.1 million, I think, was that ransomware. And then those numbers have just gone up. Now, initially, if you go back to when ransomware really started being a big issue in the mid 2010s, sure, it was 2 or 3 Bitcoin to get unlocked, which maybe at the time was $4,000 to $5,000. And that was just because Bitcoin was just starting to roll in that kind of case. So with that all being said, it was what it was. They were still trying to figure out their tools and their practice, how they were going to do it, kind of thing. So now, because companies are so willing to pay, or they have insurance that's willing to pay, and these ransomware groups have now become very organized groups in the sense that they have customer service departments, so that when they pay for the ransomware to be decrypted and it doesn't work, they will help the company decrypt their data. Now, the problem gets into the company does all that, pays the ransom, gets decrypted, but they don't fix the original problem, because bad guys are in networks for upwards of 300 days. Now, let me rephrase that. The good actors, the nation state directed actors, the organized crime groups, they are in networks for upwards of 300 days before anyone even knows they're there. The SolarWinds attack from about a year and a half ago, almost 2 years ago, when it really kind of hit the news, they were in there. The Russian actors were in there for over a year, and they got in because of a bad server configuration. It was a bad password that was used that allowed them access. And because they were in there for so long, they were able to infiltrate the SolarWinds update platform. And so when SolarWinds would send out an update, it included the malware that infected all of the third-party companies that were using SolarWinds. So are 13-year-old kids and 15-year-old kids still doing the hacking? Sure, but they're easy to defend against. They're script kiddies. It's not hard to defend unless you just do no defense at all. And certainly there are small and medium-sized companies that are not doing much defense because they don't have the resources to do it. Just like your generals probably didn't have the resources in 2007 to do what they were supposed to do to protect themselves against the 13-year-old kids. But now they're so sophisticated that you have your larger companies that have whole cyber squads all together. But they can kind of deflect against it, and the small and medium-sized companies can't. That's where the problem resolves.
I have to say, sometimes some businesses, some organizations are just asking to be hacked. Okay, they are so careless and they are so exposed that it's the only question is why they haven't been hacked, or they haven't suffered earlier and worse.
I wouldn't say they're careless. I would say they're not aware of the threat. They don't understand how vulnerable they are.
You're right. You're right. I'll tell you one thing. And I can actually confess to that because I've checked the legal issues. So I once hacked my school in 1986.
Nice.
And I also got some code that was used by the Greek army. Here's the thing. Back then in Greece, none of that was actually a criminal offense. And if it was, the statute of limitation, as we know in Greece, it would have expired. But the thing is that doing those things, I never broke a law because the law hadn't caught up with that at the time. How I got hold of some code that was used in a local military camp. The guy who was the computer guy who was doing that, he owned a local business. He had a computer shop. He let me use a computer there, and I found, it was there. I just found some copies of the code. I made a copy on my floppy disk to see what it was, and it was something like database management for for the staff. And it was a time that there were no networks in the military. Some units would introduce some desktops to try and see how those things are going to work for them, and that there was no sense of security, of keeping things safe or protected or encrypted or anything like that at the time. It was there, it was in a computer shop. Anyone else who had used that computer could have seen that material. So many other people may have actually got a copy of that. Okay. It wasn't a criminal offense, it turns out. I was like 15 years old. It was exciting at the time before video streaming and the web. But that all that it was. And sometimes I have to go back to what Darren said. Police and law enforcement agencies are catching up with criminals. They invest because that's what they need to do, and they invest. The law is left behind because the law doesn't change easily, and people, someone needs to bring a change to the parliament, to whatever facility there is there, and say, we need to change the law. How are you going to do that? It's going to take time. It's going to take a year or 2 years for something like this to change, and that's it. No, you cannot change those things easily. Prosecutors are lawyers. They were never trained to understand cybersecurity and data breaches and digital evidence, and that's a problem. Okay, what is this that we are sharing here?
I think that's Caroline typing. I'm pretty sure.
Okay.
So while she's typing, I have a question for Dr. Pasaris. So in your university or in other universities that you are associated with, what's their take on cybersecurity issues or dealing with cybersecurity or even sharing data with other folks outside of academia? And I asked this question because we had a report here in the U.S. a couple of years ago when I was still with the FBI that we contacted local academic institutions that were doing research because we knew that China was targeting researchers to steal their research. The idea being, you need to increase your cybersecurity awareness and stop being so free in sharing your data. And that was the big issue that we saw with academia was, academia wants to share information and that, which is certainly what it's there for. But how has the current environment changed that perspective, or has it changed it?
If I may answer that question then, my university, which is the University of New Brunswick in Fredericton, Canada, very close to Maine, Darren, which will put you in a geographical context, is taking cyber threats as a very important issue to deal with, because there is a lot of private and personal information that needs to be protected, in addition to the research that is going on that hasn't come on the market in terms of patents and new discoveries. But it is also concerned about both students, faculty, and staff being in a protected cyber environment, which means that they start by asking everybody to take a cybersecurity course in order to prevent exposure and vulnerability for the institution. And beyond that, there are checks and balances put in place for the community within the university to function within those parameters, which will add a level of security to being on the internet and so on. For example, one specific example, Darren, is we've introduced these days for people who are working from home, particularly during COVID, this became an issue. We've asked them to access a VPN, the university's VPN, before they can access it from outside the campus. We've allowed certain parameters for control of the hardware and the software that individuals and professors and students can upload into their computers once they are on campus. And all of this is a very fluid and evolving situation, because I think the gist of our conversation this morning in Canada, afternoon somewhere else, and evening in other places, is that unless you keep up with the game, you're going to fall further and further behind. So this is a very fluid environment that needs to be constantly alert and to provide a protective environment, which means you have to invest time and money and resources in order to be up to date with respect to your firewalls and cybersecurity.
Totally agree. And I would like to add one more thing here. There's a human element in every form of crime, and cybercrime is no different than.
Vasily, sorry to interrupt. Let us give the floor to the rest of the two
Yes, indeed.
discussants. Sorry, Caroline, please go on.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh my gosh. Thank
She
you
has a voice.
so much for your patience with me and with the technology. I have been really enjoying the conversation and so glad that technically I am able to contribute to it. I want to share that I started my information security career in 2005, leading security teams at eBay, Electronic Commerce, and Zynga, social media gaming. These were very cool places to be working in information security and risk management. In both cases, we were running online operations 24/7 with millions of simultaneous users daily.
So when I was playing Farmville, you were taking care of my security.
Yes, hopefully so. I can I did a silly thing a bit ago, and I apologized for the disruption. But I wanted so badly to contribute that I decided to try sharing my screen, and I think it worked. And perhaps I can cut to the chase. The reason we have this cybersecurity problem is because the internet and software are inherently insecure. They were never designed and built to do what they do for us today, which is pretty much everything. The most frustrating thing for me is that we as an industry actually know exactly what we need to do to secure software. I will give the example. There is a thing called the OWASP Top 10, Open Web Application Security Project. The first version came out in 2003. This is a list of the top 10 most common security vulnerabilities, how to find them, how to fix them, how to prevent them. And every couple of years, this list gets updated. We got the most recent version in 2021. When I take the very first version, 2003, and I put it right next to the version from 2021, they are alarmingly similar. We know how to do the things, we're just not doing the things. Ransomware at this stage, folks are saying, look, there's a difference between a 13-year-old kid and a well-funded nation state. Yes, there is. But every organization in the world with software, I will bet you, is not properly tracking all of their software assets, is not looking for and actually fixing security vulnerabilities, is not backing up their data and testing those backups. And the reason is because those things are boring to do. They're not very flashy. There are so many flashy, exciting things to work on. And a lot of this security work is kind of boring. I will pause. I'd love to hear from Dr. Andreas.
Dr. Mitrakas, please give me a moment. I would like to say that this our platform, we can stay as long as we wish. So if the second panel would give us 10 minutes, perhaps 15 minutes, we can end in 7:15 GR time. Please write me on messages that you agree. Andrea, please take your turn.
Theo, thank you very much for the invitation to ENISA. I'm quite pleased to join this panel of knowledgeable people on cybersecurity. Just to share a view from the European Union, ENISA is the EU cybersecurity agency. It is by no means the only organization, the only agency that or entity in the EU sphere that deals with cybersecurity, as there is a shared responsibility across different policy pillars. I could bring up the example of Europol with EC3, of the European Commission with the CERT EU, and so on. There is a constellation of entities that support the European Union and its member states in terms of cybersecurity. And of course, the very important capacity that the member states themselves have. I'm joining this call from Berlin. In Germany, for instance, they have about 1,500 people working in the federal agency for cybersecurity across different locations. So the fact of the matter here is that, as colleagues have suggested, that we talk about a phenomenon that bears recognizes no borders, that it is a shared responsibility to provide the response, that nobody is secure and nobody can do it on their own, and therefore collaboration is the only matter there is. I listened with attention Basil suggesting his views on law enforcement, more specifically on the judiciary. In ENISA, we've fought hard and long the battle to bring together CSIRTs that are there like the firefighters in case of an incident, the law enforcement agencies that start scratching the surface and investigating a crime, and the judiciary authorities that direct the investigations when a crime is noted. And of course, they arraign the suspects. So this is just to illustrate that there's lots of nodes that need to be brought together. There's no silver bullets to it, and that we face a changing environment. Before closing this little intro, on our end, we work hard to invoke trust by bringing different stakeholders together. We have, since a relatively short period, about in the last 4 or 5 years, started supporting the area of cybersecurity certification, which essentially aims at doing what Caroline suggested. If we're unable as an industry to do the job, somebody would put us to test, to conformity assessment, that bears also the red ribbon of conformity by means of certification of a product, service, or a process. And then someone else will use it as the measure of our success. That would be the metric, our ability to meet the strict conformity assessment requirements. And this is the world that we're heading to. The EU has done it successfully and prominently in the area of personal data, even privacy to a certain extent. But here we're talking about a game that raises the bar yet further, and it's sprawling, overarching, will cover all bases as it seems within the EU, but hopefully it will have a positive impact elsewhere. I stop here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Andreas. Very interesting position from both of you, and I would like to thank you for this, and for happy that you finally made it into the platform. I'll start with you, Andrea. One of the questions about that comes about certification and professional certification, cybersecurity certification. How do you see that as a real tool in the hands of the people who are handling cybersecurity, and how much of that is a box-ticking exercise? Because at some level, for some people and for some organizations, those things are box-ticking exercises. And where do you see the balance of that?
I suppose that we need to start from the areas that are in need of certification to begin with. In this case that I'm referring to, we are looking into product, services, and processes. It is not about skills, and it's nothing to do with that. But when we look into products, for instance, then we have to reflect on the conformity assessment process, the laboratories, the conformity assessment bodies that carry that out, the accreditation entities that permit carrying out the conformity assessment practice in a given jurisdiction, and so on. And then when we go downstream, we have to think about the security requirements and additional requirements that might be needed. For instance, in the EU, the discussion around digital sovereignty, data localization has picked up recently, and somehow it will permeate in these security requirements. Then, of course, that would have a backlash in terms of stepping up the ability of the conformity assessment bodies to carry out assessments that are not strictly speaking technical, but they might also include this more qualitative element, which might have to do with the legal entity that delivers the service and so forth. And further downstream, of course, we need to think of the sectors of the economy likely to benefit from it. The first thing that springs in mind is public procurement. So when the state, local government buys services, all of a sudden, instead of just asking for a drone to monitor, to surveil a specific area, they might just ask a certified device according to such and such scheme, according to such and such criteria to do that job. And that all of a sudden would just provide the citizens and the public service that benefits from this acquisition with a more robust product to do the job.
Thank you very much.
Banking, finance might be other similar examples. Healthcare could be another one, and so forth.
Thank you very much. And back to Caroline. Caroline had mentioned something quite interesting, that it doesn't matter if it's a state actor or a 13-year-old kid that is behind a cyber attack. The bottom line is that the attack is going to happen. The data loss or the damage or the reputational damage is going to happen. If there is a criminal intent, money will have to exchange hands one way or another. We saw this transition in the criminal enterprise with malware. There was recently there was a hacking group. I think it was, just bear with me for a second. It was that was the Maze ransomware, and these were the guys who actually had this. They developed their own malware. They were attacking businesses and individuals. They were charging things like $200 to $400 to for people to get their money back, and then they realized that their business model was not actually that efficient, and they could do much better. So what they did, they focused on law firms in the United States, and they started attacking them, and they start asking $2 million from each law firm, and the big ones would have them. And I don't want to complicate things with sharing the screen, but one of the interesting screenshots that I've got from one of these attacks is that, from a victim's point of view, is that they are, as I think Darren said, they not only have their customer service department, they also are reasonable people, and they care about their reputation. So what they did is that if they promise that when you pay, you get your data, they will make sure that you did, because it's bad business for the criminals to do otherwise. If they make the reputation on the news that they give back the data to people once they've paid, the next time someone has become a victim, they will say, okay, well, this is a high risk, but it's more likely than not that we're going to get our data back, and they're more likely to pay. And they actually had an option that if you couldn't afford it, you could come and work with us. So you can help us, compromise a few of your friends or colleagues or business partners, and we'll give you your data back.
Yes. So
Any
the
comments
thing
any comments on these models and these
The thing
societal changes?
the
Sorry.
thing about humans is that they are very smart. They're very agile and they are very flexible. If a human is trying to make money, then that human will do so by whatever means possible. And if they find out, oh, the entire world, everything runs on software. Software is incredibly vulnerable. Literally, at this moment, there are more than 100,000 publicly known vulnerabilities active and live in software everywhere. Pretty easy for a 15-year-old with the right software to find. And then they find out, oh, I don't even have to write malware. I can just buy it from someone else for $100. I can just press click. Money's just going to come to me. Of course, people will do it. We make it way too easy for the attackers to make money exploiting the vulnerabilities that we refuse to fix. And it's not that we don't want to fix them. It's that it's not a priority. Because the thing about security that makes it complicated to do the right thing is that security controls, just like any business process, they take time and money and effort. And an organization, right now, many organizations who run on a calendar annual cycle, they're going through their 2023 budget planning. And they probably have 3 broad areas. They say, well, we will put some percentage in general and administrative. We will put some large percentage in sales and marketing. And we will put some other large percentage in R&D. Security is not on there. Security is not on there because security does not add value to the business. What security does is it prevents the erosion of value via risk management. But if this is a difficult justification to make in any case. If you are comparing options from your executive team and 5 executives say, you know what, if you give me $1 million, I will make you 5. And then you go to the security person and the security person says, you give me $1 million, maybe I can prevent you from losing $5 million. It's just hard. And we do it every day in our daily lives. How often do we secure ourselves properly? I go for a bike ride down the street. Do I wear a helmet? Do I not wear a helmet? Maybe I don't wear a helmet because I don't like how it looks. I think it messes up my hair, but then it depends. Maybe I'm a very good biker and I'm just biking in my neighborhood. Or maybe I'm an amateur biker and I'm biking on the streets of San Francisco. These are different risk profiles. And so every business has an organization to actually start out with a risk tolerance discussion. How much risk tolerance is our organization willing to take? And depending on that, we should decide intentionally and proactively what security controls we will invest in.
I think companies like Equifax did not have that conversation.
I am willing to bet, I don't know, but I bet that security people at Equifax said, we got to patch our Apache struts. We got to do it. And I'm willing to bet that other executives, well-meaning people trying to make the best decisions for the success of the organization said, no, we don't have time.
But
our systems down. I mean, this case of Joe Sullivan is very interesting. I wonder how familiar folks are. There is a former chief information security officer at Uber who is just convicted for doing what many global chief information security officers around the world agree that for the most part, they might actually go about in the same way. Just also very recently, the former CISO at Twitter, this guy Mudge, I don't even know Mudge's real full name. He comes out with this huge report. Here's everything broken at Twitter. I tried to fix it when I was there and they would not allow me to do so. And this is very interesting. It's almost like vigilante security done by the CISOs because sometimes they feel there's no good way to do it. How do they do it? I wonder to myself, what will make the difference? where is our, and this is a very United States focused analogy, so my apologies for that, but where is our 9/11 of cybersecurity? Because in the United States, 9/11 happened, and now you cannot fly into a United States airport without being screened and touched, and you can't bring a water bottle, and you have to take off your shoes, and you have to scan your laptop. It was not like this before. And so I wonder a little bit, when will our big problem happen? For all the problems we have, for as insecure as I know that our software is, I'm surprised we don't have way more problems. Truly, because our software is so vulnerable and it's not getting more secure anytime soon.
Vasily, if I may interrupt, we managed to get green light for 10 more minutes from panel 2 discussant, the speakers. We have 5 minutes. If you agree, let us have some questions. And before we go to the questions, I would like to say that all of you are welcome to come in panel 2 to join us backstage if you have the time and the energy to keep going. So, is it okay to share a question?
Yeah, sure.
All right. So, is it possible something like GDPR in Europe for the security field? Christos Karakosta, system engineer, asks, I saw it before. Is it possible?
Maybe Andreas will be better placed to answer this.
Yeah, very right.
Maybe it happens already. Maybe we don't call it, and it's not as prominent as the GDPR. But let's recall that the precursor to the GDPR was a humble directive adopted in 1995, which paved the way and in many ways remained unchanged for its most parts until the GDPR was adopted much later. So I think we can use the analogy of stepping stones, and you have measures that are adopted over time. They're commensurate with the perception of risk that the policymakers are recognizing at a given moment. What's important is, especially for policy, is that the situation concerning cybersecurity has moved center stage. It's not a side matter. It's not a matter for geeks or for just a few advisors that understand slightly better technology than others. In this day and age, pretty much everyone and their uncle are very familiar with cybersecurity, the risks it entails, and the need for a robust response at the policy level. So have instruments in place, and there's more that the legislative process of the EU is churning out, much like in other jurisdictions.
Okay. Let panel 2 speakers join the backstage. We have 2 more minutes before we enter the last session.
Okay.
Who wants to add something?
Well, I will repeat the question that I had before Karen and Andreas joined. Do you want to ask each other a question?
Perhaps I can
interrogate someone?
Perhaps I can ask, with just a minute left, a bit of a call to action. One of the reasons I am so excited to be invited to today's panel is I was told there are so many smart people attending, and they are not from cybersecurity. And I thought to myself, we in cybersecurity, we cannot figure it out. And so I will ask you to help us figure it out, because we need people who are thinking in different ways. The same way we have been thinking about cybersecurity for the past 2 decades, at least, is not working. We need people from other fields to help us. We need different ways to think about it, because the way we're doing it right now, it's not working.
I believe Professor Konstantin Passaris is the one that can answer this. He has a holistic view and a perspective different from the rest of the panelists. Professor Passaris, you want to answer this question?
I'll try, Theo, and I'm pleased to do so. On most days, Caroline, I think of the internet as the Wild West in the United States a long time ago. anything goes, and as long as you are a sharpshooter, you're going to get your way. Because the whole situation is so uncontrolled and is so fluid and so evolving on a day-to-day basis. And on top of that, the whole landscape is changing so quickly. There are milestones in the past where we had technological change, but it was about 250 years ago during the Industrial Revolution. Guess what? The Industrial Revolution took 100 years to evolve. People had time to introduce machines into the workplace and to adapt to this new production function. What is happening now, their pace of change is every 6 months, and that's a very short time horizon, that the whole system is not adapting. So that's one part of the answer to your question. The other part is, by its very nature and definition, what is happening in cybersecurity is global in character. And yet we insist on having a national and domestic response to it. It's not going to happen, folks, because you need the whole world in on this. You need a global approach because the nature of the problem is global. And no matter what kind of firewalls, no matter what kind of preventions you do domestically, somebody is going to find the back door and be right in your face. So without the multilateral institutions, without global cooperation, without a global mindset that we are in a different age and we need to respond differently and in a global manner, we're not going to make any headway.
Let us, we have past 2 minutes from the new, let us conclude here, and I'd like to thank you. You are welcome to join us to the next session.
Thank you very much.
Close this.
Thank you, everyone.